2 Chronicles chapter 33. Manasseh was 12 years old when he became king, and he reigned 55 years in Jerusalem. He did evil in the sight of God, just like the abominations of the nations that Adonai had driven out before Bnei Israel. For he rebuilt the high places that his father Hezekiah had demolished. He re-erected altars for the Baalim, made Asherah poles, and bowed down to all the host of heaven and worshipped them. He built altars in the house of Adonai, of which Adonai had said, "My name will be in Jerusalem forever." He also built altars for all the host of heaven in the two courtyards of the house of Adonai. Furthermore, he made his children pass through the fire in the valley of Ben Hinnom, and practiced witchcraft, divination, and sorcery, and consulted ghosts and spiritists. He did much evil in the sight of Adonai, provoking him to anger. Then he placed the carved image of the idol that he had made in the house of God, for which God had said to David and to his son Solomon, "In this house and in Jerusalem that I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel, I will put my name forever. I will never again remove the foot of Israel from the hand which I have appointed for their fathers, if only they will observe to do all that I have commanded them, all the Torah, the statutes, and the ordinances delivered by the hand of Moses." But Manasseh led Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem astray, so that they did more evil than the nations whom Adonai destroyed before Bnei Israel. Adonai spoke to Manasseh and his people, but they paid no attention. Therefore Adonai brought against them the commanders of the army of the king of Assyria, who captured Manasseh with hooks, bound him with bronze shackles, and led him to Babylon. In his distress he entreated Adonai his God, and greatly humbled himself before the God of his fathers. When he prayed to him, he was moved by his entreaty, heard his plea, and brought him back to Jerusalem into his kingdom. Then Manasseh knew that Adonai, he is God. Afterward, he built an outer wall to the city of David west of Gihon in the valley, as far as the entrance of the fish gate, and encircling the Ophel. He also raised it up much higher. He stationed military officers in all the fortified cities of Judah. He also removed the foreign gods and idols from the house of Adonai, as well as all the altars that he had built on the mount of the house of Adonai and in Jerusalem, and threw them outside the city. He rebuilt the altar of Adonai and sacrificed on it sacrifices of fellowship and thanksgiving, and commanded Judah to serve Adonai, the God of Israel. Nevertheless, the people still sacrificed in the high places, but only to Adonai their God. Now the rest of the acts of Manasseh, his prayer to his God, and the words of the seers who spoke to him in the name of Adonai, the God of Israel, behold, they are written in the records of the kings of Israel. His prayer also, and how God was moved by his entreaty, all his sin and his unfaithfulness, and the sites on which he built high places and erected the Asherah poles and the carved images before he humbled himself, behold, they are written in the records of Hosea. Manasseh slept with his fathers, and they buried him in his own house. His son Amon became king in his place. Amon was 22 years old when he became king, and he reigned 2 years in Jerusalem. He did what was evil in the sight of Adonai, just as his father Manasseh had done. Amon sacrificed to all the carved images that Manasseh his father had made, and worshipped them. He did not humble himself before Adonai as his father Manasseh had humbled himself. Instead, Amon increased his guilt. So his servants conspired against him and assassinated him in his own house. Then the people of the land struck down all who had conspired against King Amon, and the people of the land made Josiah his son king in his place. Chapter 34. Josiah was 8 years old when he became king, and he reigned 31 years in Jerusalem. He did right in the eyes of Adonai, and walked in the ways of his father David. He did not turn aside to the right or to the left. In the 8th year of his reign, while he was still young, he began to seek after the God of his father David. In the 12th year he began to purge Judah and Jerusalem from the high places, the Asherah poles, and the carved and molten images. They tore down the altars of the Baal in his presence and chopped down the sun images that were above them. Also, the Asherah poles and the carved and molten images he smashed into pieces, ground into dust, and scattered upon the graves of those who had sacrificed to them. Then he burned the bones of the priests of their altars. So he purged Judah and Jerusalem in the towns of Manasseh, Ephraim, Simeon, and as far as Naphtali, with their surrounding ruins. He broke down the altars, the Asherah poles, crushed the carved images into powder, and chopped down all the sun images throughout all the land of Israel. Then he returned to Jerusalem. Now, in the 18th year of his reign, after purging the land and the house, he sent Shaphan, son of Azaliah, Maaseiah, the governor of the city, and Joah, son of Joahaz the recorder, to repair the house of Adonai his God. They came to Hilkiah the Kohen Gadol and handed over the silver money that was brought into the house of God, which the Levites the gatekeepers had collected from Manasseh, Ephraim, and all the remnant of Israel, as well as from all Judah and Benjamin and the inhabitants of Jerusalem. Then they put it in the hands of the workmen who were in charge of the house of Adonai. The workmen who were working in the house of Adonai spent it on repairing and restoring the house. They, in turn, gave it to the carpenters and the builders to buy quarried stone as well as timber for joining and making beams for the buildings that the kings of Judah had left fall into ruin. The men did the work faithfully. Over them were appointed Jahath and Obadiah, Levites from the sons of Merari, along with Zechariah and Meshullam from the sons of Kohath, to supervise, while other Levites, all skilled musicians, were over the burden bearers and supervised all who worked from task to task. Some of the Levites were also scribes, overseers, and gatekeepers. While they were bringing out the silver that had been brought into the house of Adonai, Hilkiah the Cohen found the Torah scroll of Adonai given by Moses. Hilkiah responded by telling Shaphan the scribe, I have found a scroll of the Torah in the house of Adonai. Hilkiah gave the scroll to Shaphan. Then Shaphan brought the scroll to the king, and moreover returned a report to the king, saying, Your servant are doing everything that was committed to them. They have melted down the silver that was found in the house of Adonai and handed it over to the overseers and in the hand of the workmen. Shaphan the scribe also said to the king, Hilkiah the Kohen has given me a scroll. Shaphan read from it in the presence of the king. When the king heard the words of the Torah, he tore his clothes. The king commanded Hilkiah, Ahikam, son of Shaphan, Abdon, son of Micah, Shaphan the scribe, and Asaiah, the king's servant, saying, Go, inquire of Adonai for me and for the remnant in Israel and in Judah concerning the words of the book that has been found. For great is the wrath of Adonai that will be poured out upon us, because our fathers did not observe the word of Adonai to do according to all that is written in the scroll. So Hilkiah and those whom the king commanded went to Huldah the prophetess, the wife of Shallum, son of Tokahath, son of Hasra, keeper of the wardrobe. Now she was living in Jerusalem in the second quarter, and spoke to her about this. She said to them, Thus says Adonai, the God of Israel, tell the man who sent you to me, Thus says Adonai, Behold, I am bringing disaster on this place and on its inhabitants, all the curses that are written in the book that they have read before the king of Judah, for they have forsaken me and have burned incense to other gods in order to provoke me with all the works of their hands. Therefore my wrath will be poured out upon this place, and it will not be quenched. But to the king of Judah who sent you to inquire of Adonai, thus you will say to him, Thus says Adonai, the God of Israel, regarding the words which you have heard. because your heart was tender and you humbled yourself before God when you heard his words against this place and against the inhabitants. And you humbled yourself before me, tore your clothes, and wept before me. And I have heard you, says Adonai. Behold, I will gather you to your fathers, and you will be buried in your grave in Shalom. Your eyes will not see all the evil that I will bring upon this place and upon the inhabitants. So they brought her word back to the king. Then the king sent and gathered together all the elders of Judah and Jerusalem. The king went up to the house of Adonai with all the men of Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, the Kohanim, the Levites, and all the people from the oldest to the youngest. He read in their hearing all the words of the book of the covenant that was found in the house of Adonai. Then the king stood in his place and made a covenant before Adonai, to follow Adonai, to observe his mitzvot, his regulations, and his decrees with all his heart and with all his soul, and to obey the words of the covenant written in this book. Moreover, he made all that was found in Jerusalem and Benjamin stand with him. The inhabitants of Jerusalem did according to the covenant of God, the God of their fathers. Josiah removed all the abominations from the whole territory of Bnei Israel, and made all who were found in Israel to worship Adonai their God. All his days they did not turn away from following Adonai, the God of their fathers. Chapter 34. Josiah celebrated Passover unto Adonai in Jerusalem. They slaughtered the Passover lamb on the 14th day of the first month. He reinstated the Kohanim to their duties and encouraged them in the service of the house of Adonai. He said to the Levites who taught all Israel and who were consecrated to Adonai, "Put the holy ark in the house which Solomon the son of King David of Israel built. Since it is no longer a burden on your shoulders now, serve Adonai your God and his people Israel. Prepare yourselves by your ancestral houses and your divisions, according to the writing of King David of Israel, according to the writing of his son Solomon. Stand in the holy place by the divisions of the ancestral houses, by sons of the people, and by divisions of ancestral houses of the Levites. Now sanctify yourselves, slaughter the Passover lamb, and prepare it for your kinsmen, according to the word of Adonai by the hand of Moses." Josiah provided for all the people who were present flocks of lambs and goats totaling 30,000, all for the Passover offerings, as well as 3,000 bulls, all from the king's possessions. His officials also gave a free will offering to the people, the Kohanim and the Levites. Hilkiah, Zechariah, and Jehiel, the administrators of the house of God, donated the Kohanim 2,600 Passover offerings and 300 bulls. Likewise, Konaniah, along with Shemaiah and Nathaniel, his brothers, and Hashabiah, Jael, and Jozabad, leaders of the Levites, provided 5,000 Passover lambs for the Levites and 500 bulls. So the avodah was prepared, and the Kohanim stood at their post with the Levites in their divisions according to the king's command. They slaughtered the Passover lambs, and while the Kohanim sprinkled the blood handed to them, the Levites flayed them. Then they removed the portions to be burnt to give them to the divisions of ancestral houses of the people to present to Adonai, as it is written in the book of Moses. They did the same with the bulls. They roasted the Passover lambs with fire according to the ordinance, then boiled the sacred parts in pots, cauldrons, and pans, and brought them quickly to all the people. Afterward they made preparations for themselves and for the Kohanim, because the Kohanim, the sons of Aaron, were busy sacrificing the burnt offerings and the fat until nightfall. So the Levites made preparations for themselves and for the Kohanim and the sons of Aaron. The singers, the descendants of Asaph, were at their stations according to the commandment of David, Asaph, Heman, and Jeduthun, the king's seer. The gatekeepers were at every gate. They did not need to depart from their post, for their fellow Levites provided for them. So on that day, the entire service of Adonai was prepared to keep the Passover and to offer burnt offerings upon the altar of Adonai, according to the command of King Josiah. The Bnei Israel cele- uh, the Bnei Israel present celebrated the Passover at that time and observed the Feast of Matzot for 7 days. Passover had not been celebrated like that in Israel since the days of Samuel the prophet, and none of the kings of Israel had ever celebrated such a Passover as Josiah did with the Kohanim, the Levites, all the Judah and Israel who were present, and the inhabitants of Jerusalem. This Passover was celebrated in the 18th year of the reign of Josiah. After all this, when Josiah had set the house in order, King Necho of Egypt came up to fight at Carchemish on the Euphrates, and Josiah went out to engage him. But Necho sent messengers to him, saying, "What is there between me and you, King of Judah? I am not coming against you today, but against the house that wars with me, and God has ordered me to hurry. Stop for your sake from meddling with God who is with me, so that he will not destroy you." Josiah, however, would not turn away from him, but disguised himself in order to fight him. He did not listen to Necho's words from the mouth of God, and went to fight him in the plain of Megiddo. Archers shot King Josiah, and the king said to his servants, "Take me away, for I am seriously wounded." So his servants carried him out of the chariot and put him in the second chariot that he had. They brought him to Jerusalem, where he died and was buried in the tombs of his fathers. All Judah and Jerusalem mourned over Josiah. Now Jeremiah composed laments for Josiah, and to this day all the singers, male and female, commemorated Josiah in their laments, and they made them an ordinance in Israel, and behold, they are written in the lamentations. Now the rest of the acts of Josiah and his deeds of devotion as written in the Torah of Adonai, and his acts, the first and the last, behold, they are written in the book of the kings of Israel and Judah. Chapter 36. Then the people of the land took Jehoahaz, the son of Josiah, and made him king in Jerusalem in his father's place. Jehoahaz was 23 years old when he became king, and he reigned 3 months in Jerusalem. The king of Egypt deposed him in Jerusalem and imposed a fine on the land of 100 talents of silver and a talent of gold. The king of Egypt made Eliakim his brother king over Judah and Jerusalem, and changed his name to Jehoiakim. But Necho took Joahaz his brother and carried him to Egypt. Jehoiakim was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned 11 years in Jerusalem. He did evil in the sight of Adonai his God. Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon marched against him and bound him with bronze chains and to take him to Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar also took some of the vessels of the house of Adonai to Babylon and put them in his temple in Babylon. Now the rest of the acts of Jehoiakim, the detestable things he did, and all that he was found against him, behold, they are written in the book of the kings of Israel and Judah. Jehoiakim his son reigned in his place. Jehoiakim was 8 years old when he became king, and he reigned 3 months and 10 days in Jerusalem. He did evil in the sight of Adonai at the turn of the year. King Nebuchadnezzar sent and had him brought to Babylon, along with the precious articles from the house of Adonai, and made his brother Zedekiah king over Judah and Jerusalem. Zedekiah was 21 years old when he became king, and he reigned 11 years in Jerusalem. He did evil in the sight of Adonai his God, and did not humble himself before Jeremiah the prophet, who spoke from the mouth of Adonai. He also rebelled against King Nebuchadnezzar, who had made him take an oath by God. He also stiffened his neck and hardened his heart, so as not to turn to Adonai, the God of Israel. Furthermore, all the leading Kohanim and the people became very unfaithful, following all the abominations of the nations. They defiled the house of Adonai, which he had consecrated in Jerusalem. Adonai, the God of their fathers, sent word to them through his messengers again and again, because he had compassion on his people and on his dwelling place. But they mocked the messengers of God and despised his words, scoffed at his prophets, until the wrath of Adonai rose against his people, until there was no remedy. Therefore he brought up against them the king of the Chaldeans, who killed their young men with the sword in the house of their temple. He had no pity on young man or virgin, elderly or infirm. He gave them all into his hand. All the vessel of the house of God, large and small, and the treasures of the house of Adonai, as well as the treasures of the king and his officers, were all brought to Babylon. They burned the house of God, broke down the wall of Jerusalem, burned all the palaces with fire, and destroyed everything of value. He exiled to Babylon those who had escaped the sword, and they became slaves to him and his sons until the reign of the kingdom of Persia, in fulfillment of the word of Adonai by the mouth of Jeremiah, until the land had paid back her Shabbat rest. For as long as it lay desolate, the Shabbat rest was kept till 70 years were complete. Now in the first year of King Cyrus of Persia, fulfilling the word of Adonai by the mouth of Jeremiah, Adonai stirred up the spirit of King Cyrus of Persia, so that he sent a proclamation throughout all his kingdom, and also put it in writing, saying, Thus says King Cyrus of Persia, Adonai, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth. He has appointed me to build him a house in Jerusalem, which is in Judah. However, among you of all his people may go up, and may Adonai his God be with him.